Good morning, everyone. If you were hoping to miss my talk earlier this morning, guess what? You're here. I just want to have everyone take a minute because I need it from setting and it's a little chilly in here. I just want you to raise your arms up. Go ahead. Put them together. Go down here. Oh, doesn't that feel good? Take a deep breath. Stretch it out. Move it around. Do one of these. Oh, yeah. Oh. All right. We ready to roll? All right, good deal. All right, for those of you that do not know me, I'm Heather White. I am the president for One for All events. Yes, I have branding on, a lot of branding. And I used to teach, and that's why I'm here today, because this is a passion of mine, is getting people to understand their value as teachers, whether you think you're one or not. So how many of you consider yourself a teacher? Can you raise your hand? Okay, that's good. How many of you want to teach? Okay, good. Well, one of the most effective ways to learn is to become a teacher. You will not be more familiar, more intimate with that material until you start teaching it, because you will be in it from someone else's perspective, and they will have questions that you never had. They will understand it in a different way, and that will open up a whole new level of understanding for you as the teacher. So a little bit of background. Yes, that's my son. He was much younger there. I have a master's in education. I'm a certified teacher. I've taught pre-K through fourth grades over 6 years or so. I developed a training program for the Telemedicine and Advanced Technology Research Center. I also managed the regenerative medicine program at Fort Detrick, which included sort of cat herding PhDs and teaching them our system. And I managed training at PHP Architect, which Ed mentioned the magazine yesterday. And that's where One for All events actually came from, is we do conferences for a living, tech conferences, both PHP, Polyglot, and we're considering board gaming conferences as well. So this talk's going to contain 3 sections, just to set up your expectations. In the first section, we're going to talk about learning styles and how to actually implement those. The second section is specifically about adult learners, because we're all adults, at least by age, and what their characteristics and motivations are, because they're very different from children. In the final section, I'm going to talk about ways to take all that and put it in your presentation. So if you're interested in speaking at a meetup group, if you're interested in becoming a speaker yourself, even teaching others, some of this will play into how to present material to other people. So understanding your audience, like why bother? Why is this important? Number one, it helps you realize how to make connections with people. You have to relate to their experiences. You have to understand their knowledge level and their experience with your material. And it leads to a better experience for your learners. If you start off too high, they're going to be confused. If you start off too low, they're going to be bored. We want to avoid that in all cases. And the ultimate goal is we want to help them retain what you've given them and to be able to take it and use it. That's the ultimate goal, is to use that knowledge. Now, learning styles, myth or reality. The last time I gave this presentation was at Midwest PHP, and I had a tweet come in a little later that said, I just read an article that learning styles have been disproven. And basically saying, you're kind of full of crap. Like, what is this all about? And I'm like, oh. Now, I went and did some research, and I was like, yes. They have not been disproven. They have not been proven. That's very different. And if you have ever taught or been around children or had children, you know already in your mind that people learn best in different ways. It's just a fact of life. Some of us prefer to read, some of us prefer to do, some of us prefer to hear. Some of us use a combination of those methods. You know this. Whether you believe what I'm about to tell you or not, I think you understand that people learn in different ways. So I want you to take that, form your own opinion, and go from there. The research is the research. People have debated the pendulum of learning for longer than we will ever be alive. So take what you know and go from there. That's what I'm going to tell you. Form your own opinion. All right, so like I said, there are about as many learning theories out there as you have, fingers and toes. But they all boil down to what I call mine, but it's Howard Gardner's 7 learning styles. And the reason I subscribe to this is that when you look at all these other theories, they sort of boil down to these elements. When you take all of the fancy, most of them break it out more minutely. And that's, it is what it is, but that's trying to fit people into too narrow of slots, I think. And it's not necessarily useful at that granular level. So we're going to discuss each learning style and how that might look. So the first one I want to talk about is visual or spatial learners. These folks think primarily in pictures. They're good at reading maps, or they need to visualize words in order to spell them. They have to know what they look like. They might use intuition to solve problems. These folks might also have uneven grades in school. Like some subjects are fitted more properly to visual learners than others. So their grades might be a little uneven as they go through school. Sometimes they're often a late bloomer because the other methods of learning sort of catch up with them. They usually have strong artistic, mechanic, or even technological talents. And they're often, and I find this funny, very, very highly perfectionistic. You know those silly little quizzes on Facebook that the color differences, the very slight color differences, these are the people who can definitely see that. And they know, and if it's off by 1 Pantone number, life is going to end because it's not correct. 1 pixel off on a design, it must be fixed. These people are that perfectionistic. And those are good people to have in certain categories, like a designer. You want a designer to have that sort of drive and perfectionism. So in teaching, in presenting, how might this look? You might want to replace words with pictures. A visual, word is worth 1,000, or a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? You might use color to highlight major and minor links. It draws your eye. It pulls you there. Use a systems map to see the big picture, like show a picture of what it might look like, a mind map, a visual representation of the information. The second style we're going to talk about is oral or auditory. These folks usually have a good sense of pitch or rhythm. They typically can sing or play a musical instrument or identify the sounds of different instruments. Music tends to invoke really strong emotion with these people. They might listen to music while they're studying. They often might notice the music playing in the background of a TV or a movie more than they hear the words. These folks will also, they'll tend to find themselves humming along, like you're sitting in a restaurant and all of a sudden you're humming along to the song or tapping your foot. It's just sort of how they're built. And often a jingle or, those silly songs that get stuck in your head and you're like, oh, it's like an earworm. And yeah, that really affects these people. And like they have to go hear that song a few times and then get the earworm out and we're all good to go. So how might this look? Sound recordings can help with visualizations. A pump me up song can anchor emotions and put the learner in the right state. When I used to teach a short story, I had basically the below grade level math kids. And we were in 3rd grade at this point, and these kids have been below grade level pretty much through school. And they knew that. They knew their label. And their test anxiety, because school is very test-driven, to unfortunately sometimes. And my goal as their teacher was to get them on grade level. But they had a huge anxiety every time we had to do like a multiplication test or just simple things like that. So one of the things that I started doing to ease their anxiety was sort of to set the routine. And every time they finished one of these quizzes, I would play the song, Another One Bites the Dust. And I would let the kids get up, and they were like, yeah, I did it, yeah, and I have another one. And it became a routine. It became less stressful. And I'm happy to say most of those kids were on grade level by the end of that year. And I consider that a good achievement. So sort of like, when they play the really pumping music and the speaker runs up on stage, it's getting everybody pumped up. It's setting your mind up for what's to come. If it's a really rockin' song, then you're going to expect a really energetic presentation. And if that presentation falls down, wrong setup, the audience is going to be disappointed, I think. So songs can really set a mood. Mnemonics and acrostics actually work with these folks too. So rhyme and rhythm, if you're trying to memorize something, setting it to a jingle. My story of this is I grew up in West Virginia, Central West Virginia, and in 7th grade was West Virginia history. For those of you that do not know, West Virginia has 55 counties. That's a lot of counties. And we had to memorize all 55 and be able to write them on the map. So one of the things we did was we set it to basically Yankee Doodle. Okay, I am a long ways past 7th grade, but I still know this. Barber, Berkeley, Boone, Braxton, Brooke, Cabell, Calhoun, Clay, Doddridge, Fayette, Gilmer, Grant, Greenbrier, Hampshire, Hank, Hardy, Harrison, Jackson, Jefferson, Kanawha. You get the point. Okay? This is stuck in my head because we said it did. And we all of those of us who in that class who chose to do that, we aced the test. And so it has a powerful way to memorize and do things and make it stick way longer than you need it to. All right, so the next style, or the third, is verbal or linguistic. So if you're a verbal or linguistic learner, you like to express yourself probably both in writing and verbally. You love reading, writing, playing with the meaning or the sound of words, tongue twisters, rhymes, limericks. You probably know the meaning of many words, and you probably like to show that a little bit. You like to use your vocabulary. Often these folks, you can tell some bits about people, what type of learner by the words they use. If you are an oral or auditory, and it's like, I hear what you're saying. A verbal or linguistic may say, or a visual learner may say, I see what you're saying. Subtle words. I hear, I see, I understand. Those minor changes can give you a clue as to your learning preference. So how might a verbal? Well, that's pretty simple. That's usually what we're doing, especially in presentations like this. You see what's up here, which is more visual, but the words are here. You're reading, you're writing, you're typing. That's all pretty standard school stuff. But language facilitates people with a linguistic learning style, and they enjoy learning new words. They enjoy exploring ways to use those words, and often read reference materials for fun. Just really enjoy language and how it goes together. Sometimes these folks are also the folks who can speak several languages. It's a little easier for those. The fourth style, and this one is probably, as you can tell, I talk a lot like this. This is kinesthetic learners or physical. Kinesthetic learners use their body, hands, and sense of touch to learn. They enjoy activities such as drawing, modeling, sculpting, drafting, woodworking, dance, athletics, and hands-on sciences, things where you're engaged, physically engaged with the material. Bodily kinesthetic learners enjoy creating work with their hands. And they usually have a lot of energy, and they need to move around when they're learning. Their body positioning and what they're doing is often tied to their memory. And they're often talented athletes as well, because they're just more physical. My story of this is I had a young boy who was characterized as a disciplinary problem. I had about 24 students in a room that was very small, meant to be a special education room, and we were crowded. Kids were on top of each other, and so he was in this class, and we had some disciplinary issues, I say, but not really. He needed to move to learn. So we made a deal. As long as he was not affecting anyone else around him, he could lay on the floor, he could stand at his desk, he could go sit on the beanbag I had in the corner. As long as he was engaged and not bothering anyone else, I didn't care what he needed to do to learn. And he actually was not a problem, and his grades soared, and he did a really good job. So these folks need to get up and move around and physically engage with whatever they're doing. That's how they commit things to memory. This was a hard one when you're presenting or teaching. It's easier in a teaching situation where you've got hands-on and you can, in a small one-to-one group. But in a presentation, this one doesn't quite work so well. Sensations, that's what you can sort of explain, is the sensation of doing the actual act, so to speak. Describe the physical feelings of your actions. Use physical objects as much as possible. Many of you probably in education where you used to pass around the objects so everyone could see and feel and touch. That's something. Role playing is also physical. If you've got people up and talking and engaging, it's still physical because you're up and moving and talking about the material. These are also the folks that do not like doing worksheets, workbooks, exercises. They would rather ditch all that and dive into the code, so to speak, and start monkeying around to see what they can make it do and learn by mistakes. They don't want to go through the act of doing exercises. It's just annoying and time-consuming to them. So the fifth style is the logical or mathematical. These learners are very methodical. They think in a logical, linear order. It makes sense, laid out. They're very adept at solving math problems, as you might guess, and they're typically drawn to logic, puzzles, and games, working the brain. So what this might look like is progression from the small pieces to the big picture can be really helpful for these learners. They need to see how things connect and go in an order and how things might be laid out. Diagrams for logical learners are very, very, very helpful because it's a visual representation, but it's also approaching that linear, let me see how this goes from point A to point B and how to get there. They also prefer a very structured and organized environments. Let's just fly by the seat of our pants environments are like a nightmare and anxiety for these learners. It's like, no, we have a schedule. We must stick to the schedule. We want to do, no, we can't just, fly by the seat of our pants. It causes more anxiety for these learners because it is not structured. They also have usually strong visual analysis and memory and obviously problem-solving skills. These folks are natural tinkerers, builders. They enjoy bringing mathematical and conceptual ideas into life, seeing where it takes them. Maybe computer-assisted design, creating electronic devices themselves, using computer applications, or programming computers. And then the final two are sort of a subset or a layer over the other five. Those are social and solitary. So you can, in either of these, you may prefer to learn in groups or with other people, or you prefer to work alone or use self-study. And that can flip-flop back and forth. For some activities and some things you're learning, you may prefer to be social and interactive. For other things, you may need to tone out everything and be alone. And that's okay, and that can change. But it is a preferred learning style over top of the others. All right, any questions so far? I know I'm moving fast. This is a lot of material. I've got a short time, so I'm going to pump your brains as full as I can. All right, adult learners. Adult learners are very different than children. We have different expectations, and we choose our learning rather than it being mandated for us. That's the big one there. We choose what we want to learn. So whenever an individual is able to choose what they're learning, they're more motivated to learn. Adult learners desire a peer relationship with their teachers as opposed to a hierarchical one. Adults also expect greater availability of their instructors. They expect to be able to go talk to them and ask them questions and be available to that. Adults also have a greater reservoir of life experiences simply because they've lived longer and they've seen more. And what this does is adults consciously or even unconsciously tend to link any new learning to learning that they've already done. And this is where I was talking about understanding your learner. Adults have to link up where they have left off to understand and move forward. They evaluate the validity of new ideas and concepts in the light of how that idea or concept fits their previous experience. This is why people's belief systems are really, really hard to change, is because they're judging everything that comes at them based on their previous experience. You have no way to change their previous experience. You can only provide new insights and new ideas to change their experience moving forward. Adults are particularly motivated to learn information that seems immediately applicable to their wants and needs. If they don't need it, they won't use it, we're not particularly motivated to learn it because there's only so much room up here. We've lived longer, done more. There's only so much room. We get to the point where if something comes in, sometimes something has to go out. And we're practical people. And we prefer to learn the applicability of a concept rather than the theory of it. Theories were for college. We're adults now. We want to know, what does it do for us? How can we apply it? How does it make my life easier or better? That's what we want. Drill down to the core of it. The motivations of adult learners. Social relationships. Doing well in the eyes of our peers, right? Social welfare. Fulfilling more wants, more needs. Making money. Better lifestyle, new car, what have you. External expectations. Keeping your job, staying current with the times. This is very hard in the technology realm. Things are changing and moving as fast as you can learn something. That's why most folks tend to pick a lane and kind of stay in that lane, because it's hard to know everything, because it's always changing, always moving. Personal advancement, learning in the pursuit of improving oneself. That's why you see so many seniors and older individuals who are retired. They want to keep learning. We are creatures that want to learn. We want to expand our horizons and see what's out there. Escape or stimulation, to not feel bored, to explore our interests, our loves, broaden our outlooks, as I said, and new experiences. What else? What am I missing, right? And finally, cognitive interests, learning for the sake of learning, motivated to know more, simply because. Additional motivators are also feedback. We are goal-driven. We need feedback to keep us on the path towards our goal. Are we veering to the left? Are we veering to the right? Are we doing well? Are we not doing well? We need feedback to go towards our goal. And those rewards and benefits can be either monetary, like a raise in salary, or simply understanding the benefits of how this learning will improve our lives. Those are rewards sometimes as well. So, why do you need to understand how you learn? What will this do for you? So, I recommend for everybody to go to this website. This is actually my graph. What this does is you go through a battery of questions, and this will give you an output like this, and you see it's broken down over there on the side: visual, social, physical, oral, verbal, solitary, and logical. And the closer to 20, the higher your applicability in that style is. So you can see that I'm a very visual person, 14, that's quite high. Fairly physical, I'm talking with my hands, I'm moving around. Very oral. You can probably guess from that that I listen to a lot of music. I play a musical instrument, a couple of them. I grew up doing band, marching, jazz, all of it. I set my life to music. I love music. I can't go a day without listening to music. It actually depresses me if I can't hear music. I'm one of those people that likes to have music on while I'm studying or learning, because it actually grounds me in what I'm doing and blocks out extraneous other things around me. And somewhat solitary, it's about half and half. So I'm, not bad. But my logical score is very low. Now I will say my husband's logical score is very way the other way. This is why we work together really well, is we balance each other out. So this will help you know yourself. And why that's important, we're going to get to in a second. So let's talk about assimilation. Everyone has a mix of these learning styles. We're not completely one or the other. It's a mix. You may find that you have a dominant style of learning with far less of the other styles. You may have a one style you use in one circumstance and one you veer toward more in another circumstance. We're fluid beings. We change. And as we get older, our styles are not fixed. We can learn to improve our learning in other styles. And you can also learn to internally represent experiences in the way you recall information and the words you choose based on knowing your learning style. This empowers you as a learner and as a teacher. Now, what do I mean by this? Mentoring is a very big topic, especially in programming. And there are many qualities that go into being a good mentor. But one of the most important steps is to first understand how you learn. By doing that, you are learning how you will teach, because however you learn is how you typically teach, because that's what you're familiar with. Knowing that there are other learning styles out there, you now know that other people don't learn like you. You need to be aware of how you learn and teach, so that when you enter into a mentoring relationship, you are aware of your style and you can kind of assess what your potential mentee style is. If those styles don't match, then it's not a good relationship. You will fail. I guarantee you will fail, because you both will be frustrated, because you will be providing information one way, but they will not be able to process it and receive it and learn and grow. And that's what that relationship is about. That's the first step, is understanding you and your mentee and your learning styles, so that you can have a good relationship moving forward and that you can actually learn from each other. So reinforcement, retention, and transference. This is what it all kind of boils down to, is how do we take all this information? We figured out the what and the why of learning. Now we need to discuss the how, or really the how to make it more efficient, so that we can go use it in our daily lives. A mix of both positive and negative reinforcement is needed for us as adults in whatever we're doing. The motivations we just discussed all have positive and negative reinforcements that can be associated with them. So a salary, a new office, an upgraded parking spot, even free chocolate. We're always motivated by food. Those are reinforcements. Those are positive reinforcements. However, the lack of those positives is also a reinforcement. That's the negative side. So if you're not getting positive feedback, what's wrong? Why am I not getting any information back from my boss? This is where a lot of jobs and organizations fall down, is because we are creatures. We need reinforcement. We need to know, are we doing well? Are we doing poorly? Where are we at in this scale? We need to know. And a lot of managers are really bad at giving good feedback and positive reinforcement. So it's good to be aware of that. So retention, how do we remember? Well, the mantra of practice makes perfect pretty much has it right. The more we do things, the more we commit it to our permanent memory. And keep in mind that learners, particularly adult learners that we're talking about here, need to know the meaning and the purpose of what they're learning. Because without those, they tend to tune out. Why do I need to know this? I have enough going on as it is. They also need to be able to interpret the information, thus connecting it up to that person where they left off. If it's too advanced, they won't understand it and they cannot interpret it. And then they need to be able to apply it. How am I going to use it moving forward? Now we're going to take that and transfer it to our jobs. How we do that is, transference is sort of a scale. How much of it do I remember and how much of it can I go forward using? So more transference occurs when participants associate the new information with what they already know. How similar is it to what I already know? Can I make that leap? Can I make that jump from one to the other? Similarities. How high was the original degree of learning? Did they understand it the first time? Are they confused? Do we need to clarify? Do we need to back up? If that degree of learning was not high the first time, they're not going to transfer it. You need to go back and repeat, figure out where the disconnect is. And critical. How critical is it to their place and time right now, to their job, to their livelihood? How critical? The more critical, the more effort I'm going to put into wanting to know this material. I'm going to work at it because it's crucial to what I need to do. So now to the fun visual part. Presentations with learners in mind. Any questions yet? Real quick? Okay, good. Yep.
At what point do you kind of differentiate between young learners versus adult learners? Should I ask that again? At what point do you differentiate between young learners and adult learners?
We're pretty much to the point of our learning styles as adult learners, probably by college. Teens are a special case. I'm just going to say that right now. Between the hormones and the emotional control and all of those things, there's a lot getting in the way of their learning. They amazingly do it, but by the end of college, sort of halfway through college, we sort of hit that routine, and we are full-fledged adults. We have settled into our routine, and we were that. So early 20s is pretty much when we figured out who we are, how we're learning, moving forward. But like I said, we all change. We're always growing, always having new experiences, and all that feeds into how we learn forward, moving forward. So this diagram is very interesting and find this very powerful. So think about how most traditional schools, presentations, etc. You see up here, reading. Okay, this is after 2 weeks, we tend to remember. Reading, we only remember about 10% of what we read. That's not very much. Hearing words, what you're doing now, only about 20%. Seeing, about 30%, right? hearing, depending on if it's engaging or not, maybe 50%. But that's what you're dealing with when you're teaching in a traditional style or presenting. And we're talking about as a presenter here at this point. That's not a lot. So you have to make sure that your presentation is set up to make people remember and hear your message as best as you can do. Set yourself up for success because we're human. We're just not going to remember it. But the most impressive part as a teacher, 90% of what we say and do, we remember 2 weeks out. So, the first step, evaluate your content. Understand how your content is most clearly represented. Does it work best in a graph, a picture, a discussion, or a demonstration? Figure out what way really suits what you're trying to get across. Relevant. I figured out how I want to get it across. How relevant is it to my audience? Remember, we need to understand the meaning and how it's going to benefit us. So we have to explain that benefit to our audience so that they want to pay attention, so that they want to learn. How relevant is it to them? Do I need to take a step back and connect in at a different point and move forward? Or do I need to move forward a little bit and connect in at a higher point? Sometimes that's hard in a conference situation because we don't know where everyone's sitting with their experience levels. Attention. And I like to call this the ooh shiny syndrome. As adults, regardless of the information and how important it is to us, our attention, our focus tends to wander. It just does. We're human. As a presenter, there are ways that you can help keep that attention. Your audiences tend to notice change, both big and small, not necessarily what happens in between. So macro changes, big changes that you can make, include changing visual mediums. If you can go from like a slide to maybe a chart, or going into an exercise, etc. Flipping that up gets people sort of up, I got to do something now. Okay, look, they're changing. It's a physical change. Audience movement. Getting your audience moving, body movement wakes us up, gets us moving, that physical engagement. Change your presenting location. Cal was moving around. I'm sort of bebopping back and forth. I have another friend who paces in front of the screen. So moving around because you have something visually to watch as you're going. And like, what are they going to do now, right? Change from listening to discussing, or from discussing to role-playing, or switching that up. Change presenters. 2 of you. That changes the dynamic, especially if the voices change. After a while, we tend to drone, one voice sort of tends to lose focus on our ears, switching to another voice. Oh, wait, this is different. And changing topics. Micro changes. We tend to notice small things, such as visual subsections. If you've noticed, my slides, every time I go to a different topic, I've got that border on there so that you know we're moving to a different spot. I've also got pictures in this section because it's a little bit more visually engaging. We're also getting to the end of the presentation. So sort of clues like that to help your audience engage. Also small things like throwing in a comic for a brain break. Letting your brain pause for a second. As adults, we need processing time. Everybody needs processing time. But the max time for adults to sit and learn without process time is about 90 minutes. And then we need about an hour to process. And that's hard when you're in trainings all day, you're in conferences all day. This is why by the end of the day, we're all kind of like, brains are full, my head hurts, I'm not remembering this. We haven't had time to process. You can also change up your style of delivery, go from funny to more factual and back and forth, relax to chatty stories. Stories are always a good way to break up the monotony of whatever is going on. Now, Techniques to reinforce retention in your presentation. What was this presentation even about, right? Remember, we only remember that top of the cone, which is very little. So, first impressions. You've all probably heard you can only make a first impression once, right? You don't have a chance to redo that. Not necessarily true. As a presenter, people are going to remember how you finish, not necessarily if you tripped at the beginning. So even if something happens in the middle or the beginning, as long as you finish on a strong note, that's what people are going to remember most. So you do have a chance to recover, so to speak. Do you have a clear overarching message in your presentation? Okay, is it easy to determine what that message is? Because if you do not, the audience will choose it for you, and it may not be the message you intended. So make sure it's clear what you want them to take away. Balance. Ideally, your presentation would have a mix of those learning styles that we talked about, both visual and interactive, both text, as much as possible. But you also have to give some weight to the actual content of what you're doing. So you need to think about balancing your presentation. And a fun thing is the rule of 3. To help balance that presentation, you don't want to present too much information at once. The good rule of thumb is using a maximum of 3 points on a slide. This will help you actually move faster through your slides, so you're changing things up faster to keep people's attention. You're also not giving them so much to remember at once, so you're keeping the minds engaged. So this is just a good rule of thumb, is a rule of 3. Try to keep it to a chunking in 3s is a good rule of thumb for presenting. And one last note of caution, metaphors. If you use a metaphor in your presentation, a lot of times object-oriented programming uses metaphors a lot. If anybody's like, cars or animals or what have you. Just be aware that people will not always interpret your metaphor the way you think they should. The example I have is this, lots of things are made out of bamboo nowadays. It's ecological, it's friendly, it's a very dynamic product that can be used. This company was doing basically product research, and they had this fantastic product, and they had all these people in the audience, and it's a renewable resource, it's wonderful, we can do this, we can do that, and they got back their little surveys, and they had this subsection of people that said, I hate this product, I don't want to use this product, it's horrible. And they're like, what the heck? What do these people have problems with? Well, come to find out that these people had bamboo growing in their backyard. If you've ever had bamboo growing, it's like a weed. You cannot get rid of it at all. So these people had a nasty association with bamboo. So they were like, oh, it's associated with bamboo. I hate bamboo because I can't get rid of it in my backyard. So it's just a cautionary. Just be clear that if you use a metaphor to try to get something across, not everyone will see that metaphor the same as you do. So it's just a caution. So finally, presenting takeaways. Evaluate your content. Maintain relevancy. Keep their attention. Make sure your message is clear. And a balanced presentation. And just real quickly, I did tell you that I run conferences for a living. The reason I have this up here is our call for speakers is open right now. It closes June 23rd. So after all this learning, if you guys have any wonderful ideas, please go submit to our CFP. We cover expenses for our speakers. We would love to have you in DC. It is November 15th and 16th. And that is all. Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes.
I was just wondering, is there any way that you can, say that you're giving a talk, or say that you're doing training at a client, to teach them how to do anything.
Mhm.
Is there anything that you can very quickly use to determine what their learning style is, or what the general learning style of the people you're training is?
You can actually take a quick survey. Just very quickly, you can say, if you have something for learning, like ask how many of you prefer, like for code, say you're learning to code something, right? How many of you prefer to dive straight in and tinker? Okay, you can see, okay, those are your kinesthetic learners very quickly. How many of you prefer to read the documentation, do research, and then go in? Those are your visual learners, or not your visual, your verbal, sorry, learners. And they prefer that more, they need to read about it to process it, to then understand how to go in. And then you're going to have people in between.
Mhm.
And those are your people who have got a lot of mixed styles. That'll very quickly give you the lay of the land of how people prefer to learn. You can often break people up into groups, and then they can help each other that way too.
I just had one more question too. That like radar graph that you had showed with the breakdown of like your learning style. Is there a way? Because I could see using that almost like a disc profile, where you're able to evaluate your employees to your point about being a better manager. Is that something that like we have access to?
Yeah,
Or-
it's just online.
Okay.
I'll admit, it is an ugly website with ads all over the place. But it is, I searched through a lot before I put this presentation together, and that is one of the best ones with the breakdowns that mean the most.
Okay.
And yeah, that's available online. I will hook up my slides to Joined In, so if you need to go back and pull some of this information later, you will be able to access it that way. And you can find that link.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
We're out of time.
All right. Thank you,
Thanks.
guys.